Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today, Sikhs for Justice enjoy another 5-year ban from India. We take a look at censorship of Sikh material across the media. A quick look at India's new budget, and after our recent look at the potential new presidents of the US, we focus in on the Hindu wife of Trump's running mate. And if that's not enough, we finish up with a good news story of how the Punjab is forming the backbone of the subcontinent's representatives at this week's Olympic Games. Well, joining me, as always, for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and hello to all of our amazing viewers out there. I've seen our numbers skyrocket, so thank you for sharing with others and continue to do so. Thanks again.
Indeed, and together we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. Of course, as usual, we will be taking a look at lots of your great comments which have been pouring in. So thanks so much as always for those. But let's start off with James. James, what have you got to start us off with today?
Well, we have got a new budget that replaces the interim budget that was in place. So we're going to take a look at two quick visuals here. And the first one being the statement from the government and what they were looking at in the interim and what direction they wanted to head with the new budget. Now, of course, this interim was placed into effect prior to the election. And then, of course, now the full budget is out. But I just wanted to bring up this part here, which was a release by the finance minister and the government of India, and just cover a couple of quick points on here that they wanted to highlight with the new budget. And that is that they wanted to ensure the upliftment of the poor, women, and youth, as well as farmers. So, of course, with the farmer protests and everything else, it's going to be interesting to watch how that plays out in the new budget and what they're going to actually do for farmers and whether or not it's going to reach all aspects of farming throughout the country or if it's going to be subjected to regional restrictions. So we'll have to see how that plays out. There's also other interesting things that have been introduced in the full budget, which I will pull up on the screen here for everybody. And again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I just want to bring up 6 points that I thought were interesting that the BBC brought up and share them with you. And I'd love to see what your thoughts are on the new budget. So make sure you share your comments. And again, this is from the BBC with 6 takeaways. Now, investors, whether it is short-term or long-term, they're going to be hit with a adjustment on the financial gains taxes, and that goes from 10% to 12.5% for long-term, which is anything over a year. For anything less than a year, then you're looking at a 5% jump from 15 to 20% on, again, the investments and capital gains. With the budget is also increased transaction tax on derivatives trading and a few other areas there. So again, I'm going to just kind of go through it fairly quick to keep everybody in line with where I'm showing, but at the same time that if you're interested, you can take a look online at the BBC or on the Government of India website for the financial budget. Now, you can see a $24 billion jobs plan that's going to take effect and cover for the next 5 years. Now, with this, what I found interesting is that they are going to be offering a direct cash transfer to anybody entering the workforce, and that's going to be an equivalent to 1 month's salary to help them get started within the workforce and to help with the employment issues that India is facing. And that seems to be a big focus on this budget. Now, there are other incentives as well. So there's programs announced to boost manufacturing jobs, and there's going to be other incentives for different employers and employees to try to stimulate the employment market and to encourage more creative openings for that. When you look at the other interesting things that I saw was the tax relief for startups, middle classes, and foreign corporations. And with that, of course, the lower the tax rate for the foreign corporations, you're looking to invite a lot more corporate investment into the country. And that's something that Angus and I have spoken about in previous episodes here on Perspectives, is looking at their trying to entice and seduce so much the corporate business individuals coming from China or moving headquarters to there from America and other countries. And so that, again, the corporate tax on foreign companies is a reduction of 5% from 40% to 35%. So that may definitely promote a lot more investment, but we'll have to see how that plays out. And again, that may not really have a huge effect on the entry-level employees. However, for those who have been in the job market, have job skills and training, especially in the high-tech sector, it could be good news. Now, a budget for the Allies. Now, of course, they are increasing spending in certain parts of the country to keep their allies and their other parties that they've had to work with in order to retain the third term. So we'll see some spending there. And we're going to have to really keep an eye out to see where the money goes and how it's handled, and also if there's going to be any new investment for areas such as Punjab or for Kashmir in terms of security, and you know, the other areas that we've been talking about with human rights issues and other violence that's been going on for decades. And I do believe that, you know, more money needs to be spent as well as finding other solutions. But I do believe that security is an issue, and trying to find programs that'll work for the people and not for the government. And that's the big trick there. Now, of course, the reduced budget deficit, they were originally in the first image that I showed you, that was projecting a deficit of 5.1%, but that's come down to actually 4.9% in the union budget and the final budget here. The central bank dividend payout of more than $25 billion was mainly responsible for that. And it also has been looking at cutting expenditures and just being a bit more fiscally responsible. Again, it's all on paper, so we'll have to see how it actually works in reality. Now, I'm going to skip through this here in terms of infrastructure because there are some new things there, but I didn't really want to cover that too much. There's also new programs for entrepreneurs and small business to encourage the smaller businesses to be registered and to take advantage of opportunities to bring in, you know, 2 or 3 employees, or just to be self-employed for individuals who are unemployed at this time. So I think that we have seen in Western nations how impactful the opportunities for self-employment and entrepreneurship has been, and I think that's going to help with the job strain there in India. So with that, Angus, that's pretty much an overview as to what I found interesting about the budget so far. And of course, it's a lot of reading and a lot of information to take in, but I really hope that the focus on job creation and the equality, and it states in the budget that the programs are supposed to be equitable and fair for everyone. And we'll have to see how that works out, because we know that it quite often does favor Modi's, you know, interests, and his interests are definitely not with the minority groups. So we'll have to see if it truly is open to everyone or if it will be restricted.
Yeah, I find this quite an interesting budget, because it actually is quite symptomatic of Modi's weakened position. I think after this last election, he suddenly found himself, and his chief economist have found themselves in a position where they're not quite as powerful as they were for their last 2 administrations. They are now having to make concessions to, well, certainly coalition partners, and there are other elements of the Indian economy that they are going to have to pay attention to now that otherwise they could just forget and steamroller over in the past. I think that a few key takeaways for me on this one. I think as a general note, I do notice it is much more of a redistributive budget. I think there is, I mean, in India, there is a serious wealth divide. There are, of course, the very wealthy, but it is a nation with some of the most deepest poverty on the planet. So there is this enormous wealth divide that really has to be addressed, and we've talked about the billionaire's wedding as just as a very simple illustration of that. And I think clearly in this budget, Modi and the BJP have had no choice but to address this wealth gap because, again, they are weaker now. They are not in such an unassailable position. They are now having to make concessions to their coalition partners. And certainly regionally, we see in Bihar, for example, a lot of money is channeling back to that region, again, because of this very situation. The question then is, what about all these other regions, though? What about the Punjab, the the northwest of India, and indeed the northeast of India? So these peripheral, marginal regions of India, what are they benefiting from this budget? I don't see an awful lot, certainly nothing of any great significance, which all it's doing is exacerbating these same issues. It's just further dividing the regions from the central cow belt. I think another one, looking at the bigger picture, was the FDI, the foreign direct investment. Clearly, a hard dose of reality has hit India, or certainly hit the BJP, where I think in the past they have tried to follow this very isolationist, this very protectionist policy. It actually reflects something that Trump does in the US, where they're trying to keep Indian jobs for India, Indian investment, recirculating around India and closing off foreign investment, essentially trying to build the Indian economy using Indian money, Indian infrastructure, Indian people and Indian everything else for the benefit of India. Now that's fine, but unfortunately it does restrict the growth. You need foreign investment in most cases to grow an economy, to match your demands, your economic demands. And this budget clearly is a budget that recognises that isolationism and protectionism isn't just working as well as they hoped it had done, and they are opening up the doors. This drop in corporation tax for foreign investors has been dropped. It's a clear sign that India is actually opening up more for business for foreign investors, which actually is no bad thing, obviously for foreign investors, but certainly for India itself. So time will tell. Anything else? The deficit. I think we in the West cannot talk about deficits. We have absolutely eye-watering deficits in the West. I don't know about Canada, James, but here in the UK and certainly in the US, we have eye-watering amounts of debt. We have debt mountains that are just unforgivable, that will take generations to pay off, but that is our problem. India is in debt, but it is not, I believe, not in debt to the extent that we are in the West. I think, the farmers. Yeah, another good point. The farmers. Again, some concessions to the farmers. We do know that the Punjab is the breadbasket of India. What's coming out of this budget for farmers? There is a bit, not a lot. Well, time will tell. Again, are there more concessions to the farmers? We'll see. No doubt the farmers on the ground will let us know in only the way that they can do so well. Unemployment, again, another concession towards this deep, massive unemployment problem in India. Again, this relates to the wealth divide. Again, I think this budget is a hard reality check for India. I think India has realised that it cannot continue with this huge wealth divide if it wants to compete in the modern world now. It has this massive underclass. It has a growing middle class. And these classes, these different classes come with big demands. And I think, again, this budget is paying a service to a lot of these middle and lower class income households that have to be addressed. So an interesting budget, James. Thanks for that.
It is, and in keeping with their goal to be, with the India development goals to hit 2047, to be considered a fully developed country, it's this, I think, will help in moving that towards that goal if, again, it actually is followed through and monitored how this works and make sure that corruption doesn't override common sense.
Indeed.
All right, so with that, we will move on to the next story, and it's actually, I'm going to keep it brief. I've got just a little bit of information about Mrs. Vance. That's J.D. Vance's wife. She is an attorney. She is a very educated lady, very smart lady, but I also really appreciate the way that within their relationship, they've always been very vocal about how they work together. With that, something that we don't see a lot in politics is the equal the equality in the relationship. We see the dominant individual who's running for office, and then we see almost the wife and kids as, you know, the decorative sort of stand beside me's on the stage. I think that is really an interesting dynamic now, though, with Mr. and Mrs. Vance, because he gives her full credit for her intelligence, for being a sounding board to allow him to bounce things off, and policies, and, you know, so I just think that there's a lot there for her to be the second lady of the United States. I think that there's a lot of new and vibrant energy that she brings with, well, I'd say with him, but, you know, alongside him, to support him, but also to really be active. And I think we'll hear a lot. If she ends up the second lady of the United States, I think we'll see her a lot doing things for the American people. So let's just take a quick peek at a video here that I quickly put together today. And I didn't get any stock footage, but I know that, you know, some people don't like just using the, you know, the generic stuff. So I just put together some photos of them. But more importantly, it was the script that I wanted to get across.
Hey everyone! Today, I'm diving into an often overlooked but crucial element of political success, the strength and influence of a remarkable spouse. We're talking about Usha Vance, the powerhouse behind J.D. Vance. Many know J.D. Vance as the best-selling author of Hillbilly Elegy and a rising star in American politics. But what you might not know is the vital role Usha Vance, his wife, plays in his journey. Usha isn't just J.D.'s partner, she's his rock, his confidant, and his strongest supporter. Usha Chilukuri Vance is a Yale Law School graduate and a successful attorney in her own right. Her intelligence, poise, and dedication have been pivotal in shaping J.D.'s political career. From behind the scenes, Usha has brought a unique blend of legal expertise and emotional intelligence that complements J.D.'s vision for America. Imagine this, a vice president's wife who not only understands the complexities of the law, but also embodies grace and resilience. Usha's commitment to justice and her deep-rooted values make her an inspiring figure. She's been J.D.'s sounding board, offering sage advice and unwavering support during the most challenging times. As a mother of three, Usha balances her professional life with family, showcasing her incredible strength and multitasking ability. Her example of balancing work, family, and public life is something many can look up to. But what truly sets Usha apart is her unwavering belief in J.D.'s mission. Her faith in his vision for a better America has been a cornerstone of his political journey. Usha's influence extends beyond her family. It ripples through the communities she touches. So as we look to the future, envision a vice president's wife who embodies intelligence, strength, and compassion. Usha Vance is not just a partner, but a driving force, an inspiration, and a beacon of what true partnership can achieve. Thanks for tuning in, folks. If you're inspired by Usha Vance's story, hit that subscribe button for more insights. Make sure to add your comments, and they may appear in the next episode of Perspectives here on Satluj TV.
So again, Angus, I just thought, you know, she's quite inspiring, and I think that she has a lot of energy, but also intelligence to bring to the position and to bring to the American people.
Yeah, an interesting lady, another lawyer. I roll my eyes because certainly British politics has been certainly dominated by lawyers for so many years, and it comes. Yeah, I think the immediate sort of reaction is great. You know, somebody highly educated, intelligent. But certainly we've had some interesting lawyers in British politics. So again, my slight cynicism because I hear that profession.
And Canada, Angus, and Canada.
What is it about politics and lawyers? I don't know. But yeah, clearly a very accomplished lady, clearly very intelligent, very powerful. And yeah, it would be interesting to see what she does bring to the table in practical terms. Clearly she is a fabulous support for her husband. I think Donald Trump's team chose Vance very carefully and very deliberately, obviously. Strategically, I think one of the reasons is probably because of her and what she brings to the table. I think she will help bring a lot of the Indian diaspora vote to the Republican Party, but also I think she not just visually makes a great shoulder-to-shoulder companion with Vance. I think clearly she can speak for herself very eloquently. I think she can make very powerful addresses where it's needed. Yeah, I think she is probably a very powerful pillar in that team. It will be interesting to hear what our audience think about her. I'm curious to know what our audience's perceptions are of her. We don't know much about her actual heritage and background beyond obviously what's out in the public domain. Time will tell. I think it's one of those things, James, where I think slightly unknown quantity, again, because it's early days. If Trump does take the White House, yeah, I think we'll find out quite quickly what this lady does stand for and what she brings to the table.
Exactly, and as you said, the information that we have, and it's also, it's Ohio. It's not New York. It's not California, and I don't mean that as a negative. But what I am looking at are the numbers and the diversity and everything that comes together with more of the populated states, because they're going to be representatives of every state, not just Ohio. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. And I mean, it's no secret I'm not a big lover of Trump, but at the same time, I report the facts. And I actually really like Vance and his wife in those positions. I really do. I think that gives them a real leg up and a bit more credibility in the selection run.
Indeed, and I think we'll talk about our audience's thoughts in the comments section, because it's an interesting cross section. Even you and I, James, we have differing views on Trump, but again, the complexities of the situation. It's not black and white. There are always, there are so many complexities to this, and this is reflected in a lot of the comments that our audience are divided on their thoughts about Trump and about Vance and indeed about Kamala Harris. Although I think the majority, well, we'll talk about it in a moment, but the majority do seem to have reservations about Kamala Harris. But it's an interesting dynamic, as they say in polite circles here in the UK. Never talk about religion or politics at a dinner table for obvious reasons.
But when we're bringing news and current events, it's hard to avoid.
Indeed, as long as it's kept polite, then we're okay. Okay, let's move on.
That's why they've got an ocean in between us, so we don't get too riled.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Okay, let's move on and let's get serious again. And Sikhs for Justice. Unfortunately, their ban, Gurpatwant Singh Panun's organisation Sikhs for Justice, it was banned 4 years ago in India for being what they call a terrorist organisation. That ban has just been extended for another 5 years. And Gurpatwant Singh Panun, as we know, he has been the subject of this potential assassination plot that was thwarted by the United States Department of Justice, and has formed essentially the subject of a lot of friction between India and the West. Now, this ban, which was originally instituted in 2020, really came about because Sikhs for Justice was designated a terrorist organisation by the Indian government, essentially primarily for its democratic referendum campaign that it was launching to gauge support for Khalistan, for this self-determination for the Punjab. And interestingly, and we come back to our old nemesis, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, this awful piece of anti-democratic legislation that India created. And Sikhs for Justice was banned under this very piece of legislation. This is a piece of legislation that has been used, or rather abused in so many situations, essentially to label any political dissent, essentially anybody who disagrees with Narendra Modi and the BJP. It allows the BJP to label anybody as a terrorist, and essentially it then becomes rubber stamped by the courts within India, because it's very easy under this. The legislation is drafted to allow it to make it very easy to essentially label anybody that they want as a terrorist. And unfortunately, Gurpatwant Singh Panun and Sikhs for Justice have found themselves on the wrong side of this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. And they claim it was for anti-India activities. the committee who decided on this said that the activities of the group were unlawful, disruptive, threatened the sovereignty, the unity and territorial integrity of India. Here we go again, same old story. And that the SFJ was working in collusion with anti-India entities and forces. And therefore they had to declare SFJ as an unlawful association. And Mr. Punun himself was declared as an individual terrorist, again under the UAPA, for promoting secessionism and allegedly encouraging Punjabi Sikh youths to take up arms. Well, that's questionable. But yeah, once again, this terrible piece of legislation has been used to extend the ban on Mr. Punun, who basically resides in New York for his own safety. And even, as we've discovered, he's not even safe in New York from the tentacles of India's intelligence agencies. But of course, the referendum rolls on. Delighted to see that the referendum moves to its next place, its next location, which is in Calgary, in your neck of the woods, James. And I think that's on the 28th of this month. And
it's coming up this weekend.
Oh, good Lord, that's come up quickly. It is indeed this weekend. And of course, there have been all sorts of car rallies, I believe. Miles and miles of car rallies. We see this on a regular basis, and particularly in Canada. We've got some fabulous footage in the past of these snakes of cars, just with billowing seas of yellow Khalisani flags. It's quite a sight to behold, actually. It's a very impressive sight. And it's very clear again, and it's very easy to jump to conclusions, but it's very clear just as an observer of these things where this referendum's going. I think the result is looking pretty in the bag. And of course, so I think this last rally, the video which I'm showing, is in Edmonton, and again it was a miles-long convoy promoting the referendum. And I understand that Mr. Punun himself has actually managed to hand all the details of the latest voting information, the latest referendum in Calgary, to Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith. So even the Premier of Alberta has become involved, if not indirectly, in this referendum. She, of course, recognises the democratic credentials of this referendum, even though it is unofficial. It is being held under all normal protocols. It is being overseen by a group of independent democratic experts who are overseeing the process to ensure that it follows all normal democratic norms and protocols. Unfortunately, one other thing on this, there is evidence that people, and one has to assume Hindutva activists, have been seen defacing and destroying signage for the referendum around the area. And of course there's been graffiti, and again it's in any democratic referendum, whatever that referendum is, it's very unfortunate to see this sort of thing happening. We saw it actually here in the UK in our recent elections, where some of our right of centre parties' material was deliberately destroyed and defaced. It's a very undemocratic thing, and actually you've already lost the argument if you have to resort to methodology like that. And unfortunately, the referendum for Khalistan has seen that unfortunate thing going on. And then just to wrap this segment up, and this just goes off at a slight tangent here, but it is a slight update on, I suppose, the question, what is America, what is the US doing about this transnational oppression? What is it doing about the ongoing case, this investigation into the assassination plot of Gurpatwant Singh Punun? We have Nikhil Gupta, who appeared in court recently, and of course investigations are still ongoing behind the scenes, and of course the investigation is linked to what happened to Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada. And I have just a quick 60-second or 1.5 minute video, an interview that was held very recently of the National Security Advisor in the US. Just take a look at this video. It says a lot and says very little, all in the same thing.
About a year ago, CIA Director Bill Burns and Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines went to India and raised concerns with the Indian government about suspicions that the Indian government may have been involved in the assassination of a Sikh activist in Vancouver and what turned out to be a thwarted assassination plot in New York, also against a Sikh activist. Have you received, we're a year on, have you received satisfactory explanations from India about what happened or didn't happen?
So first of all, we were very transparent about this publicly with the Congress, with others, and obviously that was a carefully executed plan. I sat down with Bill and Avril. I said we are going to go in the following order and actually talk to the Indians about what our expectations are in light of what we have learned, and we are going to work through until we see an outcome that we think is satisfactory. I don't think that there's a lot of value in talking about the nature of that conversation publicly. It is sensitive. It is something we are working through. The story, in my view, has not yet been completely written. We need to keep working through it. But we have had a constructive dialogue with India on this issue, and we have made very clear where we stand on it and what we would like to see. And it's been respectful, and it has been effective, in my view, mostly because it is taking place behind closed doors.
So, an interesting interview, but also at the same time fairly uninteresting because he's basically saying very little. But what he is saying, essentially there, in very diplomatically couched terms, is that, the investigation is ongoing. There is dialogue, interestingly, with India. So India clearly are having to talk with the US government. Clearly investigations are ongoing, but he's giving absolutely nothing away, which I suppose is unsurprising in this situation. But the case goes on. So, James, a lot going on with poor Sikhs for Justice and the referendum. It's a never-ending saga.
Absolutely, and I think that it's actually a huge benefit for all sides that the talks are happening behind closed doors and not in the public media forum. It gives less chance for things to be misunderstood, misconstrued, and for varying opinions to jump all over the place online like wildfire. And also in line with, the Canadian prosecution of the 4 individuals accused and charged with the murder of Mr. Najjar, is that they also, for Canada's point to not releasing information, they have to balance it between what's important to release, but also not pulling the credibility of any evidence that's going to be utilized in the criminal trials. So they have to be very careful in that. So I think the US, Canada, the UK, I think that the more they hold it behind closed doors, the less embarrassing it's going to be for anybody, which opens up the opportunity to disclose, to talk, and hopefully find a resolution.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem here, of course, is this: there is a huge public demand for what's going on. We need to know what is going on because it's such an important story, particularly for our audience. But of course, law enforcement have to work behind the scenes. They cannot release information because it could potentially jeopardise or threaten their investigation going forward. It could alert people that the investigation is moving in their direction, etc. So they have no choice but to, unfortunately, give anodyne, not very useful responses like this, because they have to say, look, we're sorry, but we have to do our job behind closed doors. The problem there, of course, it leaves a vacuum of information, and nature abhors a vacuum, and the Indian media particularly love a vacuum like this because it's allowed Indian media to step in and say, well, where's your evidence? They're laughing, they're saying, where's your evidence? You're not showing any evidence. And they can, of course, fill that vacuum with their narrative, which, of course, they have been doing on a regular basis, laughing all the way. But, of course, this is just how justice works here in the West, particularly, is that, there is an absence, there is a vacuum of information for a very, very good reason. But when it comes to that point, when Mr. Gupta faces his charges, and indeed if there are any extended charges going higher up the chain, that could hit India like a sledgehammer when suddenly that evidence is presented in one full and comprehensive case, saying, right, here's our evidence and we're now ready to proceed. And things do tend to suddenly work like that, where there's an absence of any information, and suddenly all that information is presented in one complete dossier, and it can hit the target like a sledgehammer. So, we will watch with interest. But let's move on to my next story, and a very hot topic, very relevant to, of course, us here at Perspectives, that of press censorship and media censorship. Yeah, we've noticed, as indeed have many of our commenters, and our audience noticed that comments have been disappearing. There is all sorts of weird shenanigans, weird censorship going on behind the scenes. We haven't got to the bottom of it, but we do know it's going on. Now, censorship, press censorship, has been going on for many years, particularly with the Sikh, the Sikh organisations who have been promoting any material relevant and any stories relevant to the community. And the Sikh Press Association here in the UK have recently, very recently, had to approach Instagram about this very same topic, because they have just released news. They themselves have become target of censorship based on Indian nationalist influence on Instagram. And this has also affected one of their sister organisations, Everything's 13, which is a website dedicated to the basics of Sikhi, and other related popular Sikh accounts. And the censorship primarily has been centred around this recent one on a post for Shaheeds remembrance events. That's events specifically designed to remember some of the martyrs who have given their lives over the recent decades, and particularly 1984. And this is an area that crops up regularly, and we've reported on it in the past. Every June, every anniversary of those terrible events in 1984, there's always a lot of the Sikh organisations always highlight stories related to 1984 and the genocides that happened in that year, because of course they want the audience and a wider audience to remember and be aware of what happened, of those terrible events, of the terrible crimes that were committed in India. But every year that all this material gets pushed around social media, gets promoted, every year new articles are written, new perspectives, new insights are released, these articles start disappearing, or they start being banned or shadow banned. They start being restricted. Their audience suddenly becomes reduced. Comments start disappearing. And it's been noted. And the platforms where these articles are promoted on are clearly guilty of restricting the flow, restricting the audience to these articles and this material. And this has happened on Instagram, it's happened on Twitter, it's happened on Facebook. And so recently, the Sikh Press Association here in the UK have approached Instagram to say, look, this is a reoccurring issue. You've got to look into this. You're supposed to be a free platform of free speech. You're supposed to be a free media. We are a religion practicing our free speech. We are a faith practicing on social media. Why are you doing this? Why are you limiting our access to Instagram and indeed our audience's access to our material? And Instagram have been approached by the organisation for an urgent meeting, and of course as of now they have still not responded. What a surprise. But this does go back, even in just recent years, all sorts of examples that we've brought up. And another one, there's even the Sikh Coalition over in the US. Recently, they released a huge press release. Dr. Prabhat Singh, and he's one of the many Sikh community members whose social media posts were restricted, and they pertained particularly to the anti-Sikh violence of 1984, but other instances of discrimination and violence that were sanctioned by the Indian government. But they again were censored by social media platforms, and particularly over a particular period between March 21 and May 22, so just over a year. Several posts, photos, videos made and shared by Dr. Singh were removed from both Facebook and Instagram, with no indication of why they violated any of the community's guidelines, or which claims or whose guidelines they violated. So again, they were removed without notice, but without explanation. And the impact of this is very significant. And of course, Dr. Singh from the Sikh Coalition, he actually sent a letter via his attorney. So he sent a legal letter to Meta, the owners of Facebook, outlining the specific censorship that he'd experienced, explained it in great detail, and demanded why this was going on. He explained and he set out this wider pattern of censorship. Why was it happening? And he asked Meta to explain it. And Meta, unfortunately, just did not explain it in any meaningful manner. And again, in 2020, the World Sikh Organisation in Canada, in your neck of the woods, James, They again had the same thing, again relating to 1984 particularly, but again in a wider context where other material was disappearing. And they were themselves deeply concerned by renewed attempts to censor Sikh content on social media platforms. Dozens of their pages and posts were censored on Facebook and Instagram over a 24-hour period. And it particularly related to material that was looking at the Sikh genocide in 1984. And an earlier campaign to censor Sikh content took place the year before, again as Sikhs commemorated 1984. And again in this specific instance, content related to the Khalistan movement and prominent historical figures in the movement had been targeted, and particularly posts critical of the government of India. And there's the clue, where the source of the censorship is coming. And Facebook censored the posting of a Times of India article about Indian embassies gathering data about the Sikh diaspora. So again, another story that we've highlighted. We know that India has been using its embassy network and its consulate network, where raw operatives, its intelligence agents, are using these places as bases to gather intelligence and information about the local Sikh community, knowing in full well that they are immune from any sort of prosecution or normal legal protocols, that they can get away with doing this without any accountability. And again, the censorship reports that pages have been removed completely, other users have been restricted for 30 or up to 60 days from the platforms. So as a result, the World Sikh Organisation released a very comprehensive report detailing this crackdown on Sikh social media by Indian authorities. And this report was entitled Enforcing Silence, India's War on Sikh Social Media. It did actually make several recommendations, and it demanded, or at least requested, a dialogue be opened between these media platforms and the World Sikh Organisation. And as of yet, no initiation of such dialogue has taken place. What a surprise. So basically, it's very clear, there is a very clear pattern going on here, that India has a very powerful reach across these platforms. We do know, for example, and as we've mentioned several times in the past, that the Indian diaspora is heavily involved in big tech, particularly in Silicon Valley in California. A lot of these organisations like Google, who owns obviously Google, but also YouTube, we know Facebook, Meta, and all these large organisations, Amazon, another example, who are based in California and other similar locations, have large Indian rosters, employment rosters. They have a lot of Indians working in their organisations, to such an extent that even the caste system has become an issue that we've reported again, where the caste system has been instituted in a lot of these organisations. So we do know that India has a huge reach into these platforms. We do know they operate inside, and it's not hard to work out that clearly a lot of these people inside these companies are working on the payroll, or certainly under the guidance of Indian intelligence. So again, it is not surprising that these pages that they allege are anti-India are disappearing. But being anti-India is not a criminal offence. It is not an offence in any nation, in any Western democratic nation. We have a right to say anything we literally want about India, as long as it doesn't break any of our laws. So we can criticise India, we can criticise Narendra Modi. That is our legal right in the US, in Canada, across the whole of Europe, across the whole of the Western world. It is a legal right to criticise India. And yet, here is India reaching out, this so-called great beacon of democracy, India, reaching out and ensuring that the Sikh community, when it tries to highlight the crimes, the very crimes of that nation in 1984 and since, that these posts are disappearing. It's a silent war going on online. It is a silent war being perpetrated. The aggressor here is India once again. India is the aggressor trying to silence the democratic voice of the Sikh community and other communities who it fears, other communities who politically disagree with India. It is trying to silence. Why? That is not a democratic action. That is the action of a totalitarian state. A state that has a lot to hide, a state that has a lot to fear, James.
Absolutely. And some of those large companies have had issues with regulators and entering into or maintaining operations within India. Now, with social media platforms, I mean, that is a major pool of users that they want access to, as well as the data that comes with all of those subscribers. So they have invested in the India social media world as well in technology. So it's not just, people within India that are investing in US-based companies, but the US companies are in return investing in Indian tech companies. So it's a really, interesting dynamic that when they started to put some money back into these other social media companies, that regulations kind of loosened up for them and gave them more freedom within that country. And, I've personally been through it. I know that with doing the reports and such with Satluj previously, I know that my TikTok was blocked for violations, which I have no idea what they are. I've complained to them that being an accredited international journalist, that anything that I report on is fact. But still, I can share, I can follow other people in that, but I cannot actually post any new videos to that TikTok account and the 10,000 followers. So I had to open up a secondary account to be able to post new things. So I know exactly how frustrating that is.
And it is very scary, the power that social media platforms have over all our lives across the world. These platforms are essentially the platforms which a lot of political influence is exerted. So they have a huge responsibility, and it is essential for the whole world to ensure that these platforms remain free and fair. Because if they're not, if they are influenced in this way, then basically, again, this is how democracy fails. This is how people's lives just fall apart in terms of society levels. This is how countries fall apart, again, through misinformation, disinformation, when these platforms are not free and fair. So, we must all fight it on every level, But let's move on to my final story, and it is a good news story, I'm delighted to report. Let's move into a completely different arena, that of sport, which we don't cover very often on our channel, James. So, the Olympics. We have the Olympics starting this weekend in Paris, France. A very exciting event for those who follow sport. But why are we talking about it on our show? Well, I'm delighted to report that of India's 117 Olympians, it will include 19 directly from the Punjab, in addition to a few other Punjabi and Sikh athletes living in other Indian states. So altogether, Punjabis and Sikhs will account for nearly 20% of India's Olympic Games team, even though they only make up 2% of India's population. So that is one enormous achievement. I'm very delighted to see that. So the Punjab itself has, I think, 18 or 19 athletes in total. I think 18 directly from the Punjab, 19 Punjabis. 10 in the hockey. Hockey is a huge sport for the Sikh community. I myself have been involved in it when I was kindly invited in Arizona to play hockey amongst the Sikh community there. So I do know hockey is such an important part of the Sikh community. So 10 members of the hockey squad going to Paris for India, representing India, are from the Punjab. 5 in shooting, and again I think this reflects the wonderful military heritage of the Sikh community. Golf 1 member, athletics 2, and adjacent to Punjab, Haryana, again northwest India, Haryana have 24 athletes representing India, and the biggest areas those are in the wrestling and again the shooting. So a fabulous turnout from northwest India. Well done to the Punjab. Been a few interesting comments from the political side on here. A few Hindutva people are saying, "Well, there you go then. if you're invited as part of the India team, why are you arguing for Khalistan?" Well, my simple answer to that is, well, Khalistan. You imagine Khalistan in the Olympics. What a team that Khalistan could put out for the Olympics. I think it would probably do extremely well in the Olympic hockey for a start. But there's a whole different issue. But so it's been a fabulous announcement in terms of all the teams. I think the Punjab can hold its head up high. An excellent turnout from northwest India, and I just want to indulge ourselves a little here, and we talk about hockey, particularly the Phoenix Hockey Club. in Arizona in the US. And again, the Phoenix Hockey Club, made up of the Sikh community in that area. And it's backed by a gentleman, Tony Mangat, who's involved with Satellite TV, and his son, Namit, has had a fantastic career in hockey. And I had the privilege myself to actually play in a game with Namit himself, a very accomplished hockey player. I myself have barely picked up a hockey stick in my life, so I embarrassed myself at the time. But it was a huge privilege to play with Namit Mangat.
We need to specify for our Canadian viewers that we're not talking ice hockey, we're talking grass or field hockey.
Field hockey,
so
yes. My apologies, James.
Canadians who are really confused at this moment.
Of course, and I must apologise. Naturally, I'm talking, yes, about field hockey. Ice hockey is something else completely differently. I'm not sure. Are there any Sikhs playing in ice hockey, James? I don't think there are there? Are you aware of any?
We do have a few that are in the National Hockey League now, so they are slowly making inroads.
Well, there's a topic for a story that we must bring our audience in.
We'll cover that on another day, though. I'll do a story on that. We also actually have Sikh reporters and sports analysts in the NHL as well.
Fabulous. Well, I think we'll have to cover that in a future show, James. So we'll make a note of that. And of course, if any of our audience want to contribute any insight into that, let us know in the comments. Thank you. But yeah, Namit, son of Tony Mangat, he fabulously high-achieving individual. He captained. He recently, only a few weeks ago, was announced as the US Under-21 captain. So he has captained the US national side in their competition. That went to the national championships up in Canada, I believe. They came fourth. The US team came fourth. But again, fabulous achievement. But yeah, the Phoenix Hockey Club up in Canada, the Canada Cup this year, the Canada Cup 2024, the Phoenix Hockey Club went up there and they won that entire competition. They beat in the final Yuba City, securing a 3-1 victory. So well done to the Phoenix Hockey Club winning the Canada Cup in this year, 2024. So I just want to show, as a final thing, just going back to the Olympic Games, one final picture that I want to show up here. This is a brilliant graphic, an interactive graphic, shows the level of people, the number of people from each state, Indian state, who have gone as part of the squad, the Indian squad. The darker the colour, the darker the purple, the more people from that state in the Indian squad. Look at that. Fabulous representation in the northwest of India. Punjab and Haryana stands out very proudly, doesn't it, James?
Absolutely. And congratulations to all of those athletes who have worked to achieve their dreams to make it to that level. So, I mean, it's no easy feat, that's for sure.
Well done to them. Good luck to them in Paris. We will be watching with interest. Okay, let's move on. Again, time marching on. Let's move on to our hundreds and hundreds of comments. Some great comments, some fabulous debates going on all sides, and it does show the differences of opinion. Huge, varying opinions in our audience. As I said, slightly polarised between the Trump and the Kamala Harris camp, but I would say generally leaning towards the Trump side at the moment. Guvi Yul made a comment yesterday that we did talk about a lot. Made some very interesting comments yesterday, and again has brought up this comment, a couple of comments today, which I wanted to follow up on. Unfortunately, they don't think like you. They consider Hindus and Sikhs. This is referring again to a comment that this person made yesterday about the Muslims and the Pakistani Muslims. They consider Hindus and Sikhs less worth than cattle. We will always be kuffars to them. You know what's happened to all the Sikhs and Hindus in Pakistan? Thank God Modi brought them back. Then he follows this up with a very interesting comment. To me, all of India is Khalistan. And I do recall yesterday that this person did say that they are a Punjabi Sikh and they are happy to be part of India, which of course incited a very interesting debate that followed it. Of course, a lot of people piled in, politely, I'm happy to say, questioning it, but disagree. But this person's followed up with a very interesting comment. To me, all of India is Khalistan. I go everywhere freely, and I'm greeted with love and respect, as are other Sikhs. And I think this is the case for most Sikhs. And I think most of our audience wouldn't disagree with this. I think a lot of India is very welcoming to Sikhs, and I'm very pleased to see that. I think the real problem here, and I think this misses the real problem, of course, it's not so much the rest of India, it's the Indian government that the problem comes from. And again, we talk about this a lot. There is a clear divide between the people of India and those who rule India, the upper caste Brahmins, essentially, the ruling elite, who essentially have control of India. And I think, and I see this regularly in many outlets, that, yeah, I think most of the Indian communities mix extremely well, very amicably. And we see lots of comments about, I've got lots of Hindu friends, I've got lots of Muslim friends, lots of Sikh friends, Christian friends, etc., etc. Of course, because the communities mix and integrate perfectly happily. And normally they live their lives on a day-to-day basis. They're not interested in these silly high-level politics. And I think your comment here is right. Yeah, as a Sikh, you can probably travel. I don't know, but you're telling me this, that you can travel around India perfectly, happily and freely, which I think was a very interesting comment to make. But then there's this really interesting, insightful comment from Sikh Wisdom. Thank you for this comment. I'm going to read it, rush through it. Khalis means pure in spirituality, which is not limited to any one religion, group, community or label. Khalistan in the present day is very different to our Guruji's preachings and teachings. All sides of dirty politics use and manipulate communities to divide and control. How true. Our Sikhs are being targeted and destroyed because of our own naive assumptions and lack of honest and politically astute united leadership for our scattered community across the world. This is a really interesting point. And I think basically it's saying that the Sikh diaspora is so diverse, geographically speaking, is so dispersed, that it is divided. There are lots and lots of organisations all speaking up. But is it united? Is it unified? Does it have a unified message? And even I notice as an independent observer that the Punjab is divided. The Sikh community is divided in views and opinions. Now, this is not unsurprising. We're all human beings. Even in our own tribes, our own groups, we are still divided. We still have differences of opinion. But I think this highlights a point that I've noticed, that, yeah, there are still disagreements between different factions of the community. But that's only human. So, yeah, interesting that you raise this. At last, our India is rising. We Punjabi Sikhs are rooted in its soil and the same Vedic culture, outlook and history. Politically, India has not been a truly appreciative friend, but politically, Pakistan has never been anything but an opportunistic wolf in sheep's clothing. Interesting comment. Pakistan is an artificial construct. Well, so is India. India is a wonderful, reinvigorated phoenix, and we will be good friends, not enemies at all. As a very old, dispassionate spectator, that is my conclusion. I love England, Punjab and every state of India, and even Pakistan, wherever I've been. Thank you. Beautiful comment, beautifully written. And James, I think that speaks an awful lot in that very interesting comment.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the goal, I think, for everyone, is the hope of peace and for people to live together in harmony and just be able to, just be neighbors with each other and treat each other like, friendly neighbors.
Yeah, and I think, it highlights the point that we've made, is that Khalistan should, and when it comes about, will not be an enemy of India. It can't afford to be an enemy of India. It wants to be a friend of India, and it can be, and will be a friend of India. It can sit shoulder to shoulder with India. And I think this point raises that whole thing, is that it wouldn't want to be an enemy. Why would it be? Khalistan will be founded on very deeply moral principles. It's not out there to make enemies of anybody. And that's the whole founding principle of not just Sikhi, but of what Khalistan... Khalistan essentially will be an extension of Sikhi, of the whole principles of Sikhi. So let's move on. A lot to get through. Now we start moving on to the political debate in the US. Kastani Jat says, Harris and Biden both are the same. Harris can't defeat Trump. She's not a strong candidate for the highest position in America. Now, I brought this in because this does summarise a lot of similar comments. A lot of people don't think Kamala Harris has what it takes. She's not a powerful enough figure to take on Trump and certainly to lead America. And then I've got a few comments here from XOYZ. And again, these follow a bit of a theme. The RSS are going to be all over Kamala Harris and will try to engage itself to get her voted to push their Hinduism agenda in America. This beautiful country need not to be touched by these corrupt people who've already damaged, ruined India. They called Sunak son of India and tried to infiltrate British politics. Thank goodness that Britishers were more intelligent and didn't fall into their trap. I'm not so sure we were that clever. Thank you for your compliment. I don't think the British failed to fall into that trap. I think the British did fall into that trap to some degree. I think Sunak fell into Modi's trap, unfortunately. And this is an interesting point. Yeah, this person says that they are a Democratic voter, but against Kamala. And we see this quite a lot. A lot of Democrat commenters in our audience are obviously inherently Democrat voters, but they won't support Kamala. They fear Kamala for many reasons. One is this RSS potential connection. The other is because just as a person, they just think she's too weak. She just doesn't have what it takes. So even this Democrat voter will vote for Trump, even though this person doesn't like them. Nothing against Harris, and she's a wonderful woman, etc., etc. But it's that RSS element. And then we just go slightly into a different topic here. The same commenter says, half of the Sikh community have flown out of Punjab. Punjab's being filled by the people from other states increasingly. Sikh community was worried about their special identity. Now the very identity of Punjab is in danger. This is all about the dilution. And B33263 says, that was planned to finish Sikh identity, finish Punjabi culture and Sikh history. But the Khalsa Raj is inevitable. God will bring justice to Sikhs. Absolutely. But yeah, this again, and in a completely different topic, this again covers that whole issue of the Indian government deliberately diluting the heritage, the indigenous culture of Punjab with a very clear agenda in mind. James, any comments on Kamala Harris and the RSS?
Well, I think that an important point to remember is how fractured and divided the U.S. is right now in terms of the people. And I don't think that's going to be something that goes away overnight. But again, it is something that we discussed the other day about the big pool of money that's been raised for the Biden-Harris campaign. Even though Biden's now out, Harris can still use that pool of money for her campaign. If somebody else was to come in and run, then she wouldn't be on the paper, or sorry, that new candidate wouldn't be on the paperwork. They'd actually have to start fundraising all over again. And the legalities and the transfer of that major pool would drag out and potentially not even be transferred over before the election. So it's also about the financial end of running a candidate. So there's a lot of intricacies that play into this and why they are really pushing Harris. But let's not forget that in certain municipalities and townships in the States, dead people have won elections. So it just shows you that you just don't know what to expect or where it's going.
Yeah, you're right. And I think one of our commenters, actually, we haven't put this comment up, but one of our commenters did also make the comment that that they believe that Kamala Harris had a $50 million war chest behind her as well. So
yeah.
Again, more comments following the same theme. I would never vote for Kamala. None of my family that I know of are voting for Kamala. Donald Trump 2024. And then a few more comments following that same that same theme. But then I wanted to show this one. Baldev Sidhu. Wow, are you guys crazy? Do you not know how Trump said he doesn't care about democracy abroad? He's Modi's friend. You guys are fake IDs of BJP RSS. And I actually believe, and I haven't shown this comment up because I was going to cover it tomorrow, but this very same person has just, I think this morning, made a following comment that he is now unsubscribed because he believes we apparently are BJP RSS plants, which I'm very, very upset about. So just to, unfortunately, Mr. Baldev.
And I'll take it a step further there, Angus, is that I don't know if it was the same individual that accused us of being AI chatbots or AI bots and that we weren't real people. So, you know.
Well, if we start glitching, you know we are. But anyway, one thing I can assure you, unfortunately, if Baldev Sidhu has unsubscribed and is not watching anymore, which is a great shame, do come back to us because we do enjoy talking to you you and debating your comments, but I can assure you, certainly, that James and I are nothing to do with the RSS. I think what I have said about the RSS over the last year or more, I think hopefully establishes my credentials about my thoughts about the BJP and the RSS. I would make a very strange double agent if that was the case, as would James. So, but come back to us, subscribe.
And we're definitely not bots. I would have been much better looking if that was the case.
And then finally, just to wrap up, we come back to the old censorship, and these comments I think confirm a lot of what we've been worried about. Aman said, I believe my comment was also raised. I regularly see your show and was waiting for my comment to be discussed. Well, we're discussing your comment now, so thank you for your comment. But unfortunately, your earlier ones never appeared. Modi Drink Moot. If you leave comments about Sikh freedom, then YouTube deletes the comments. It's happening to me every other day. Comments are getting deleted. It's true. That was from Satvir Singh. Comments are getting deleted. It's true. So good. He said it twice. Ironically, those two got through. But I joke. But it's very clear that comments are not getting through. And it's also very noticeable that several people's comments have appeared on 3 or 4, even 5 times, where clearly your comment hasn't appeared. You've tried to send it through again and again and again. And finally, it has got through. Please keep the comments coming. For whatever reason that we have probably touched upon, they are being removed. We are being shadow banned. The only fight back against that we have is, as we said yesterday, spread the word about us. Get more people to look for us, to view, subscribe to us. That does ensure that you get to see our videos, that you get alerts when our videos are uploaded daily, and often more than once daily. So please do keep those comments coming. Thank you for your perseverance. Your dedication as an audience is very much appreciated. We couldn't do what we're doing without you supporting us. We couldn't be bringing out the truth, this alternative narrative that India is so desperate to try and close down. We couldn't bring this to you and our audience and the people in the Punjab, the Sikh diaspora. We couldn't be talking to you if it wasn't for each and every one of you watching us, subscribing to us, and of course sending in your wonderful, insightful, intelligent, funny, sometimes angry comments. Keep them coming. We love them. We love talking about them, James, don't we?
Absolutely. And just also keep in mind that if you have friends in India that can't watch the show because of it being blocked, which we also know, just mention to them about a VPN or a virtual network there, and they'll be able to get us on their screens.
Indeed, VPN is your friend. But there we must wrap things up. We have run over time once again, as always. It's become a bit of a habit, but we must wrap things up. But of course, please keep those comments coming in, as I mentioned. You can, of course, as always, email us directly anything that you want to tell us about at message@satelagetv.com. Please keep those emails coming in. But in the meantime, you have been watching Perspectives. It is goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe.
You have been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.